How's everyone doing? All right.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We have mics here, Brandon on this side, me over here. So if you have any questions, just raise your hand.
Good morning, Zach. Back after the Bain trade, you talked about that as an attempt to reshape the roster around John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. And without remembering your exact language, it seems like you sort of acknowledge that it's not an instant thing. It's a process that might take some time. So I'm wondering, given sort of those realities, what benchmarks or results this season are going to communicate to you that the plan is still an active plan, that you're still on pace for the plan that you want to?
When we're looking at this team going forward, what we're building towards, the goal remains the same. Nothing's changed, since we began, and the standard's going to remain, the same of how we're operating from here. I think I was honest, at the end of last year and, sharing our internal assessment that where we were wasn't good enough, in the context of trying to compete at the very, highest level of the NBA. And that's the standard that we hold ourselves to. We wouldn't have, if we were just trying to be a perennial, low-end playoff team, something to that effect, I don't think we would have made that move. I don't think we would have, it was a significant organizational decision, certainly to trade away someone who made such a positive impact on the court and off the court, as Desmond did. And the job, at the end of the day is living out, where we believe we really can get to, over time, and in making that decision to prioritize draft capital and some players, as well in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope specifically, going forward, who I think is going to be a positive contributor to this group on and off the court. But yeah, in reaching that decision, there was an honesty, looking inward and looking forward of, we're trying to reach the highest, level of the NBA, an NBA that's changing, in 2025 of the style of play and the build of a roster that you're seeing, reach the highest end, outcomes. The standard's going to remain the same, going forward. But what I would say is we have a group, as we're kicking off this season, that we have a lot of belief in. I think our defensive infrastructure has improved significantly. I think our ball handling, playmaking, ability of this group has improved considerably. We have some, injuries certainly in the front court at the beginning of the season, but on the whole, I think we're very happy with the big depth, that we have going forward. So for this season, as we dive in, we're certainly going to uphold really high standards day to day of what we think this team is capable, of achieving, game in and game out. We're certainly going to try to push and get the most that we can, operate with a high level of discipline, aim for a high level of consistency. I think this group is capable of maybe surprising people, relative to where it's perceived, at the moment. But that's glad to unpack any of that further. But there's a lot of confidence in the guys that we do have and what we're building towards.
But for this season, is it purely where you are in the standings, or are there things that would tell you this plan of reshaping around John Jaren over multiple seasons is still a plan you can follow?
Yeah, I think it's easy, and a lot of people get caught up in, these terms of team building of retooling or reshaping or rebuilding or things to that effect. You're building towards a championship from when you start, and the build continues. And at any point in time, I think you need to continue to be honest with yourself and answer the question, what is going to give this team the best opportunity to win a championship over any time, horizon? Now, there's a lot of guys that we think have, including the guys at the highest end of this roster, and John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., that I think have the capacity, certainly to contribute to a team that wins, at that level. So we push forward with a group that we believe in, with a lot of flexibility in terms of the assets that we've been able to accumulate. I think if you look at the broader, landscape of the league, we with the players that we have, at the moment, and the assets and flexibility that we have going forward, I think we're in a very advantageous, position, building towards where we believe we're going to be able to get this group to.
on Ja, he's missed some games the last 2 seasons, and I'm just curious, what do you think this season in particular means to his future? And then also, he was eligible for an extension this summer, and then he will be going forward as well. And I guess where did things stand with that?
Yeah, I'm very encouraged by the offseason that Ja has had and the trajectory that he's on going forward. I think it's fair to say that this is a big season, for Ja. I think it's fair to say that as we, continue to build this team, we need, to be able to achieve a high-end outcome in the near term, we need Ja to be a consistent, all NBA caliber player. All of that said, I think Ja is going to have a big season. I think Ja recognizes what's in front of him. I think, his approach and his understanding, of what it takes, to be to achieve that level of success, in this league. I think he's doing the things that he needs to do, day in and day out, that is going to put him in that type of position and in turn, put this team in that type of position to reach the type of outcomes we all, believe that we're capable of. So I'm really encouraged by what I've seen behind the scenes with Ja. I'm excited for you all to see it from him soon.
Hey, Zach, you have a roster that's kind of have a little bit of everything. You got the continuity, as you talked about, with Ja and Jaren. You have some of the newness with Coach Isolo and some of the younger guys. How do you sort of and then you have the injuries that you got to navigate going into the season or the recoveries. How do you sort of evaluate how the season needs to progress based on where you stand in terms of what this team will need from month to month?
Yeah, I think the way that we're looking at it, we're focused on the day-to-day. We're focused on, executing at an incredibly high level, really pushing the limits of what this group is capable of, upholding high standards, getting in, I think from a conditioning standpoint to play that we want to play, it's critical to be in, elite condition. We're evaluating that, who is, really, living that out, day in and day out, because to achieve something at the level that we're pushing for, it has to be a full team, concerted effort, really embracing that type of approach every day. But I'm encouraged that we have a group that's well positioned to do so.
Going back to Ja, with new coach and everything, how much does his role change, or does it change at all? Do you depend on him as much, or do you kind of let this expand out a little bit more with the new coach?
Yeah, I think when we look at this roster as a whole, depth is certainly something that we prioritize. I think we have a very deep roster, and I think in terms of ball handling guards, I think this is as much depth as we've had, in recent history. Really, we want Ja to be able to play as many games as he possibly can, but between Ty Jerome, Scottie Pippen Jr., even Javon Small, I think we're encouraged by what Javon is going to be able to bring to the table, over time as well. I think we have a core of ball handlers that is able to, not just kind of keep things running, but really compete at a high level, at that position. So excited about the group that we have there.
Hey, Zach. Zach, what are the realistic expectations for Coward, especially in this first year, and a little bit more on why you decided to move up and draft him?
Yeah, very excited to, and I know Cedric is excited as well. I'm sure that will come through for Cedric to get out there and actually be able to play in some basketball games. He's poured a lot into the rehab, that he's gone through over the last year. I think if you look at the types of trades from an athleticism, from a physicality, from a processing standpoint, Cedric is a player that has everything that you look for to be an impactful two-way wing, in this league and the way that the direction of the game is going. So he's someone that we, as we talked about, this offseason after we picked him, he was someone that he was our guy. He was the guy that we wanted. We were hoping we could come out of the draft, with Cedric Howard as part of this team. Behind the scenes, I've been really encouraged by what I've seen on the court, but also just the person, the work habits, the approach that Cedric brings to the table. So excited to, he's got to come in like everyone else, earn his opportunity, earn his minutes, but excited to see him do so.
Zach, right here in the back. couple young guys that were the toast of the town 2 years ago. Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. obviously had their seasons last year largely derailed by injuries. What kind of opportunity do you feel like they have this year, especially with some of the other injuries in the front court, to maybe reestablish themselves as impact players moving forward?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the season, but more broadly in general, there's no feeling sorry for ourselves. We have who we have, and we got to attack every game with the guys who are available and are healthy. I think Gigi and Vince are two guys that have that have had productive off seasons that have a lot to prove. But I think there's a lot there, and I look forward to seeing having them kind of see that through. I want to give Gigi a lot of credit, relative to the end of last season, where I think you all saw it. There was, visible frustration. I think it was reaching a point of, got to kind of take a step back and recalibrate, and seeing the work that Tuomas and this coaching staff this offseason have put, in with Gigi playing summer league, and a lot of, the work kind of building up to the season. There's so much there. He really the care factor's through the roof. He's gotten really clear direction and has a clear understanding of the things that he needs to do and needs to focus on, to get his way, on the court. And he's really embraced that. I think there's been a jump, that I've seen of the discipline, of the consistency, of the focus, day to day with Gigi. And you want to see him, kind of not just because of the tools, not just, because of theoretical potential and all these things that get thrown around. Like there's a real, there's a goodness to the person. There's a care factor that's always been there, with Gigi. So I'm excited as we dive into camp to see Gigi, continue to try to build on it.
With Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. in particular, starting with Brandon Clark, is there any long-term concern with this situation with his knee? Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more there? And then with Jaren Jackson Jr., we know the timeline, but is it somewhat of a goal to have him back by the season opener?
Yeah, in short, to answer the first question, no, it's not. That this is unfortunate, that we're in this spot, but there's no, lingering, concerns beyond this. To share the update on Brandon Clark, I'll spare Ross here on this one. Brandon underwent his scope this morning. That was successful. Brandon will be reevaluated in 6 weeks. That's the timeline for reevaluation from here, but it sounds like that went quite well, this morning. So can't wait to get BC back. Jaren, I think opening night would be on the front end of that, the timeline that we put out on Friday, I believe it was, and I'm not going to say he's going to return this day or that day. I'll kind of stick to that timeline that we put out publicly. But if I know Jaren, he's certainly pushing to get back as soon as he possibly can, and it's gone smoothly. I think both on the updates other than Brandon, that we shared on Friday, I think all three of those were very positive updates. On Jaren and on Zach Edey, that is in the timelines for return to play, that we shared, those are relative to where, those injuries started. Both of those cases are either on or ahead of schedule, of where we hope that things would be. And then Cedric, obviously a full participant. So again, we have who we have, and we're going to make the most of it.
Right here, Zach. Really quick, did that have anything to do with the signings that you guys just did lately, bringing in some of those guys that may not be at the top of the mind for the fans out there, but that might have a chance to play early because of those injuries? Yeah,
I think if you look at the two-way spots, we certainly prioritized depth in the front court, as we filled out with PJ Hall and Omax Prosper. That was certainly something that came to mind. Those are spots where we've been able to find playable depth, if not more, in the past. And Jock Landale, I think all three of the veterans that we were able to go out and acquire, this offseason in terms of Ty Jerome, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and Jock Landale are well positioned to be significant contributors to this group. They're all guys that I think bring something real, to this group, things that this group will benefit from and have needed, in some cases. But Jock specifically, in terms of the front court, and your question, is a player that I think really has the skills that have done well, in Tuomas' system, in the past. I think it's the type of skill set for a big that Ja, plays, best with as well. Difficult decision, there. That was kind of 1-1, kind of hand in hand with trading Jay Huff, Jay is a really good player, but to be able to recoup some assets, put Jay in a position in Indy where I think he'll be able to thrive, and bring in, knowing that we were, lacking kind of a traditional, big to begin the season, and the type of bigs that again, I think will thrive in Tuomas's system. Getting Jock was a high priority, and being able to recruit him, here to Memphis was something we're glad we were able to do.
Zach, two more if you can. One, can you just, I guess, what's the status with Edie and how he's feeling, and what are the expectations when he comes back? And then also with Tomas coming in last year, I know he couldn't make a ton of changes that late in the season. So what's your understanding of how different this team will be strategically this season?
Yeah, I'll start with Zach. Relative to where things started, he doing very well. On schedule, if not ever so slightly ahead. I would say in terms of his progression and ramp up, he's doing well. And from there, the hope, the expectation is that he just continues to build on the progress that he was making at the end of last season, when I thought he played quite well down the stretch. Remind me of your second question, please.
How different the team might look strategically from last season?
Yeah, I think in a way that when Tuomas was kind of handed the keys, down the stretch last year, there was no time, no opportunity, no expectation, of being able to, overnight implement things and really embrace his approach. I'll let him, elaborate on it more, but the benefit of having, an off season and a full training camp here as we embark on this season, you're going to see very much, Tuomas's system. I've encouraged him, and he has my full support and backing to really embrace the things that at the end of the day, looking through the lens of output and winning, at the end of the day, if there's something that he thinks we should be pushing the issue on, I would expect that we're going to do so.
Last question, Chris.
Hey, you gave us a lot this morning to chew on, so I appreciate that. Not to pocket watch, but ownership has had a very good year in the stock market. Has there been any conversations on like a luxury tax if this team, is in the top 4 again this year? And then micro looking at it, by some metrics, Ty Jerome is actually better than Desmond Bane. How much are you looking forward to what Ty can do with this team, and how much did knowing he was in your back pocket allow you to move on from Bane to maybe get the assets in KCP?
Yeah, vis-a-vis ownership, we're continue to be very fortunate to have, and with Robert and the approach that he takes, and certainly the backing that he gives us. I think we have, the best ownership in the NBA. I think we're able to operate in a manner where we prioritize, we aim high, because we believe in what we're building towards, and there's no shortcuts, in what we take. And we have the backing to do so in every respect. So very grateful for the support that we have from the ownership level. In terms of Ty is someone that as we got into free agency, this offseason, we projected him at a higher level. As certainly those of you who follow this closely know, the only free agent exception that we had, given that we were choosing to prioritize, I think for good reason, doing a renegotiation and extension with Jaren Jackson Jr., choosing to operate as a room team, we only had the room exception. Ty Jerome is someone that we thought was most likely going to fall into the full mid-level exception. We nonetheless, tried to make a pitch, to his camp and really help them understand the fit, that we saw here, a real belief that Ty could be successful, in Tuomas's system and take a step forward in his career. And Ty turned down, opportunities that financially, were better, than the one thing that we could offer. So we're excited that we have, in all 3 of our veteran acquisitions, guys that wanted to be part of this team, wanted to be here in Memphis. And I think they're going to bring a lot to this group, in terms of, Ty's shooting ability, Ty's playmaking ability, and just his competitiveness. The time I've spent getting to know him, he's someone that it's clear why he's been able to, emerge. So much of it is a level of care, a competitiveness, and what he brings to the table.
Great. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.